This meeting is being recorded.
Excellent. Thank you for that wonderful introduction and the important housekeeping, Neil. I just want to say a warm welcome to all of you that have joined us this lunchtime for this really important event during Race Equality Week, which starts from today until the end of this week. And it's an annual UK-wide movement which unites thousands of organisations and people to address the barriers to race equality in the workplace. And we know that now is the time more than ever to galvanise and maximise the impact through a nationwide collaboration for real change. As you can see, I'm Sanchia Alasia. I work at London South Bank University as the Acting Director of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. Now, why are we having this event today about Black men and mental health? Well, evidence shows that Black men are far more likely than others to be diagnosed with mental health issues, and also far more likely to be sectioned under the Mental Health Act. But research has also shown that up until the age of 11, Black boys don't actually have poorer mental health than others of their age. So there are multiple reasons why this disparity is happening. There's stigma, there are cultural barriers, and of course systemic discrimination which are experienced by Black boys and Black men as they grow up. And that's why it's really important that work is focused around supporting people in times of need, but also around prevention. So we're having this event today to really have a focus on this important issue. It's going to be an interactive event, so we won't just be speaking at you, you'll be pleased to hear. And I'm really pleased to introduce our guest speakers. We have Nathaniel Pamah, who has an educational background in the areas of social science, African history and mental health, and his professional background centres on youth and community development, mentoring and self-mastery, education and mental health. And he's currently working across South London as a mental health and recovery practitioner. We also have Patrick Vernon, who is an established senior manager, has worked across voluntary and public sector and has been responsible for developing and managing health and social care services, mental health, and also has been involved in cultural heritage projects. And he's has worked with a number and a range of stakeholders who have a particular interest in Black men's mental health and well-being. So we really want to thank the guest speakers this afternoon for taking the time to join us, sharing their experience and their knowledge, and hopefully leaving us with some nuggets of what we can all do and what we can take away to improve this situation. So at this time, I am going to hand over, I believe, to, is it Mia or Nathaniel for the next stage?
Hand it over to Nathaniel.
Nathaniel, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Sanchia. I hope you can hear me clearly. I'll do the sound checks first. Is my signal going? Already?
Yes, we can hear you, Nathaniel. That's all good.
All right, apologies, everyone. But yeah, greetings all. Time is of the essence, so I won't want to waste any time. I just want to first of all just, and I do this across everywhere, just to give thanks to our creator for allowing us to come together and have this important discussion. Give thanks to those that organised it from LSBU. Special thanks to Sister Mia, Brother Patrick, and Brother Neil for helping us and organise this. And yes, as Sanchia kind of touched on, you know, this is an important conversation that we need to have, the insights into Black men's mental health. You know, for some, it can feel like we've had this conversation many a time, but it's an important one, which is why it still needs to be on the table, because things still need to be addressed. So as I kind of introduced, my name's Nathaniel. A lot of people in the community know me as Brother Nat. And yes, I just see myself as an advocate for nation building and positive transformation. I just wanted to run through of what we've got in store for today. For those that had seen, and been able to read through the bit of the summary on Eventbrite, it's exactly that. We want to have an interactive conversation. We really want to pick Brother Patrick's brain, because he's been on the escapades of trying to address some of the social injustice that we find, particularly amongst the Black and minority ethnic communities, and for today in particular, Black men, African men. So we're going to kick off with a bit of an icebreaker. And I hope you enjoyed the video for those that caught it. I came across that only recently, but it just goes to show that there is amazing work that's been going on to try and challenge and address the insights into Black men's mental health. So I want to kind of kick off with a icebreaker, as you know we normally have in these types of events, but Sanchia touched on a question, and this should be coming up in our poll. It would just be a simple poll. So yeah, it should be popped up now. So please feel free to complete that. Should be straightforward and just click in. But it's just quite simply to check on what we know. And one question I always throw in there is, if you complete this quickly, and you can pop it in a chat, but just for your reflection, what does mental health mean to you? As we always have that question thrown at us, and how important is mental health, I guess, against your physical health or your spiritual health, and that will allow us to really get an idea for each and every single person, where we're at with understanding mental health. All right, so I see the polls are coming through now. And one thing I really want to try and do is not be the one talking so much. It'd be great to hear other people's opinions, obviously, Brother Patrick, and yeah, whether that's in the chat or unmuting, there will be time for that. So excellent. We're seeing quite a few numbers of people hit on the poll. And so first question, I'll read through the questions as well for those that haven't been able to get to the poll. How many times more are Black people likely to be detained under the Mental Health Act than white people? A common question, but do we really know? And it seems, yeah, we've got an informed audience right here. 74% so far are indicating 4 times. Second question was, Black men have the lowest mental health treatment rate. How low is the percentage? Yeah, so that is the second one. And the third one, boys from African and Caribbean communities in the UK have lower levels of mental health problems at age 11 compared to white or mixed heritage boys, as Sanchia identified. And so for those that didn't catch it, maybe this will be one to check in. Is that true or false? It's quite even so far. And just one to kind of throw in a bit more of a, it can be sometimes dark and dreary when we're talking about this subject. So to throw in there, what famous musical artist famously used 432 hertz frequency to his music? Kind of gave it away for his. But yeah, there's 4 to pick from. And yeah, it seems like we've got pretty much
we're 80% so far, Nathaniel.
I think that's a good amount. For the consideration of time, let me just give out the correct answers, shall we? And please do put your comments in if you've got any reaction to it. So where's my poll that I had as well? So 4 times, and I'd kind of know this off by heart, but just in case I make a blooper, 4 times more likely for Black people to be detained under the Mental Health Act than white people. Statistic that you know, when we say has anything changed, well, sometimes things do change. Sometimes it can increase. Black men have the lowest mental health treatment rate. How low is the percentage? Well, in fact, it is 6%. We've had 35%. Many people thought 7%, but it is in fact 6%, compared to 13% in the white British population. So it's quite a stark difference there. And if you consider, I always bear in mind, consider the ratio of population, you know, and it's often said, you know, the Black and ethnic minority community has less than, was it about 10% of the population? Right, and the third question, boys from African and Caribbean communities in the UK have lower levels of mental health problems at age 11 compared to white or mixed heritage boys. A really reflective question, because you wonder, well, how comes, you know, as Sanchia identified, how comes there's more issues and you know, barriers that come into play as young African Caribbean men grow into men. And yes, it is true. It is true. Quite an even one there. And the last one, what famous musical artist famously used 432 hertz frequency to his music in light of celebrating his Earthstrong, his birthday of yesterday? It is Bob Marley. So well done to those that got that. 60%, that's a staunch amount. Probably sure that all of those artists came to use that. But something I just wanted to share about that is that the 432 hertz is said to be mathematically consistent with the patterns of the universe. And studies reveal that 432 hertz tuning vibrates with the universe's golden mean pi, which is a calculation, and unifies the property of light, time, space, matter, gravity. I bring this fact into play because it's often identified as the happy frequency, that which makes us calmer. So trying to throw in a solution there already. Listen to a bit of Bob Marley, and it can help in some small aspect for many. Maybe not for all, but for many. All right, so that was, let me share of the results, and then I think we can see the results there. And that's just to let you guys know. And thank you for those that participated. All right, so moving on swiftly, got housekeeping out the way. I wanted to go straight into you know, our conversation and really opening it up for us to explore. So I've been joined by none other than Patrick Vernon, one of our prominent advocates, activists in our community. And let me just get this up as well, right? Because I should have had this up as well. Gosh, but yeah, Patrick, our guest speaker, me being one to facilitate, but our guest speaker in Patrick Vernon. And Patrick, I've almost butchered up your bit of introduction there. But
yeah, you might want to save time, Nate, because you know.
Yeah, probably. But as an OBE, as someone that has, as Sanchia kind of touched on already as well, as someone that's managed and just been that staunch and advocate, the first thing I'd like to just say is thank you so much for your efforts. I want to ask a direct question to you is, on the journey of trying to get more insights into Black men's and the Black and minority ethnic communities' mental health, what's been the challenges, what's been the successes for you in your endeavors? And that will probably tie in some of the journey about yourself and what you've been through.
Hi everyone, that's on the call today, and for South Bank University for organising this. And you know, this is a multiple conversation we're going to have. But I mean, it's a big question you've asked there, Brother Nate. I'll tell you the starting journey, how I got involved in mental health. So I I went to university. I went to Manchester. It's then called Manchester Metropolitan University. This is back in the 80s, and it was very rare to see Black British-born men to go to university back in the 80s. It's like there were quite a few Black women, and there were quite a few people coming from Africa and the Caribbean as far as overseas students. But in terms of people from, you know, in the UK, either born here or spent most of their childhood here, it was like a rarity for a Black male to go to university. And I can remember quite clearly all my peers, because during that time there was decent work. You could get a really good apprenticeship. When I say, I'm not talking about proper apprenticeship, not these so-called apprenticeships that people talk about these days. Proper apprenticeship, you go to college, you get paid a decent wage, and people started to, you know, buy the first car and house and all that kind of stuff. But people wanted that gratification like now, and but when you go and study at university, you're deferring your gratification. So that's what I did. But when I finished studying at university, I did a law degree, by the way, and I came back. I grew up from Wolverhampton, and Wolverhampton has been important to me in terms of shaping who I am, and I still have very strong links in Wolverhampton with not simply my parents being there and the community. I'm actually a patron of a mental health charity called ACCCI that's been going for about 37 years now. One of the very few Black mental health charities that's been going consistently. A lot of them have died, have gone by the wayside. But when I came back to Wolverhampton from university, all my peers, all the friends I used to knock around with, most of them had locked up. They were Rastafarians. And I saw one or two of them, and I remember seeing one of them, like in Wolverhampton, literally drugged up. I'm not joking, literally drugged up. I was just wondering, I looked around, all these guys I went to school and college with, mainly school with, and go down to the youth centre on a Friday evening, to the sound systems. All of them were on wards, on the mental health wards in Wolverhampton. And that's the first time it really hit me what was happening there. And at the time, there was a guy called Benji Burke. He had a Rasta guy. He actually went to Wolverhampton Poly, did a law degree. He also had his own sound system, and he developed a mental health project called, and that's how it became ACCI eventually. But that was, and all the guys I knew, you had a choice back in those days. You either were a soul boy, or you went to Rastafari, and I couldn't make my mind up. And then I became a soul boy, and that's another story. But the police and the mental health services, social services, even the community, everyone used the expression ganja psychosis. That all these guys were taking cannabis, and essentially that's why they were going crazy and mad. But we now know, after all these decades, it's not as simple as that. It wasn't simply ganja psychosis. There was something deeper happening within the Black community during the 80s and 90s. And it's all down to racism. And I think one of the key issues and this is a part of the history that we're still dealing with, the history of enslavement, the history of racism, and the colour bar, which the Windrush generation experienced. And we didn't call it a colour bar when we were growing up. It was basically sus laws or downright structural racism, everyday racism that we were dealing with. And I think, personally speaking, after spending many years working in mental health services, working as policy work around civil service and sitting on various NHS boards, I've just come to the conclusion after all these decades that, yes, any one of us can have a crisis. Any one of us can have anxiety, depression. We all have. I've had that. We've all had that. That is a part of us being human beings, to be quite honest, in many ways. But when it comes to the Black lived experience, when it comes to our own issues of mental health well-being, we are treated differently. There's a book that was written many years ago by academic called Orlando Patterson called Slavery and Social Death. And he describes the experiences of enslavement, that we were property, chattels, and even after emancipation, we were still seen and perceived as property, chattels. So this expression social death describes when you don't have the sense of willing, of living. You know that you're existing, but you're not dead, but you more or less be dead. And I think the way that British society has operated and what's happened in the Caribbean, Africa, around the Black experience is creating almost like a social death, a sense of hopelessness, that there's no sense of helplessness, no sense of agency, no sense of self-determination, no sense of hope. And that is why that's why the work that you do, and the work I do, many others do, around our self-esteem, Black history, heritage, being positive about ourselves, because the way that the system is designed, it wants to create this social death. And when you go on YouTube, when you go on Twitter, Instagram, you hear all these stories, you see these videos. Why is it that you see these constant videos all the time of Black people suffering? You don't see many white people suffering, but for some reason, I'm not quite sure if it's algorithms or what, but we get these videos of people share stuff on WhatsApp groups of people being beheaded, people being beaten up, people being aggressively stopped and such, beaten by the police. And it's a constant thing. And when it came to the murder of George Floyd, and that forced the world to take seriously that Black people are suffering and Black Lives Matter, it reinforces at the same time this suffering. We see the suffering in the sharp end in the mental health system, but actually we're all suffering, whether you're in a psychiatric system or not. All of us are suffering, and it's just a matter of degrees. It's a thin line, all of us, whether you get section on section 2, section 3, or more commonly on the section 136, the Mental Health Act. It's a very, very thin line that people get sectioned or treated in that way. And I think the key thing is what I've learned is that we need to make sure that we have resilience, resources, networks to keep us sane on an unsane world. So that's my stop for 10.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, you've taken us through the journeys of not just your beginnings into the mission, I sometimes phrase it, but what you've had to live and experience, and how that's, I'm sure for those that those that are with us, please do share if that's anything familiar, of the journeys that Brother Patrick has been through. I mean, one thing that stood out for me is when you mentioned of, the assumptions have been made, assumptions of what are the causes, but it's deeper than that. And so when we think of the journey and how we've got to such a deep incident taking place, you said after all of these decades, now we've come into some conclusion, and it takes, unfortunately, the tragic incidents of lives being lost very blatantly for things to really be woken up by many of the community members and many of the governance. It leads to, question which, we wanted to speak about the history, but also the politics. And so I know you mentioned of your academic attainment in law, and I'm sure that's come in handy. What has been the politics, Brother Patrick? What has been, and I was just now looking up, because I always become very intrigued with the etymology of words. What do these words actually mean? Because a lot of assumption can be made. And politics, in its very simple form, the activities associated with the governance of a country or area, especially the debate between parties having power. So it's basically our activities that go on. And I always say, when people say, I don't do politics, I sometimes think that's a bit of a red herring there, because we are political. Politics is the activities that are going on around us. So from your point of view, what have been some of the key political, milestones or issues and challenges that you face, that you feel we've faced as a community here in the UK? And I mean, that's anyone that's fighting for truth and justice. What have been the political strengths and the political successes?
Well, that's a big question, and that could be a whole Zoom event in its own right. Basically, yeah, I mean, essentially what you're describing is like the history of our own civil rights struggles around fighting discrimination, oppression in British society. I mean, you could go far back if you want to the days of Lord Equiano, who bought his freedom, was based in London. He was part of a network of other Africans who were free at the time, called Sons of Africa. He wrote his memoirs, which is still today is still popular. It's been I don't know how many editions have been done of his memoirs, and in his memoirs he describes the horrors of his own experiences of enslavement. But also he talks about reparations. Believe it or not, he's the very first person that talks about reparations. And he was campaigning as a black abolitionist, along with many others like Sancho, many others. Ironically, he never met Wilberforce. So when people think about abolition, they automatically think of William Wilberforce and Clarkson and others. They never think about black people fighting for their own freedom as well. So you can go far back as that period. You know, we can roll it forward a bit more. You can bring it into the 1900s. The first Pan-African conference that took place in 1900. You could talk about, you know, Charles Moody, who in the 1920s and 30s, a black GP doctor in Peckham, formed the League of Coloured Nations. You can go into the 60s and talk about the likes, you know, of really dear person that passed during the period of COVID, Dame Jocelyn Barrett and many others who fought to pay the campaign for the first legislation on race discrimination. You could talk about Paul Stevenson and Mr. Boycott. You can talk about Murdo Kelk's and Strong Cochrane. You can talk about the Mangrove 9. You can go on and on. Every 5 to 10 years, there are litmus points in our history which highlights an injustice. Right up today, around the Windsor scandal, in the murder of Stephen Lawrence, Deptford fires. There are these flashpoints in history which highlight, on one level, our experiences of discrimination and suffering, but also exposes the naked racism of this country and this society. So my own experiences, obviously, I suppose my involvement in activism really started in the mid-late 80s. That's how I got involved. I got involved when I was a student in Manchester around deportation issues. There's a guy from Sri Lanka that was being deported, and I was involved in that campaign. And then when I moved back to the Midlands, I got involved in there was a campaign against a murder of a Clinton McKerban, young black man guy that was murdered by the police in '87. Then when I moved to London, I got involved in other campaigns around mental health and stuff like that. I lived in Hackney, I was involved in campaigns. And then, I mean, it's weird because if you look at my career is it's a combination of activism, but also being corporate. Because I've worked in mainstream organisations like Mind during the 90s at the height of care in the community. I was at Mind for about 5 years. I worked in NHS as senior director, worked as senior civil servant, Department of Health, and run charities. Got involved as a counsellor, but I've always maintained activism throughout that thread. Sometimes when you work in these institutions, you have to play down the activism. You can't be too active, otherwise things going on here. You know what I mean?
I'm gonna interject because, sorry to interrupt you. I'm gonna interject because that is we cut from a similar cloth there, and as a bigger brother to me, there's a lot of wisdom that I've been able to gain from yourself and your journey and looking out for the potholes. So how do you manage that? And I'm sure for those that are with us now, they're trying to keep that balance of, fighting for what's right, fighting for our rights, but at the same time as being corporate and trying to look after our basic needs, have a home, transport, means to look after your well-being. How do you keep the balance, Brother Patrick? I was going to save that to the end, but I have to put it now, seeing as though you're on that subject.
It's a good question, because what I do now, because of all this experience, then this experience will be valuable or invaluable, depending on how you define it. I'm coaching people, I'm advising people, because I didn't realize, I mean, I'm not the only one, but there are a number of us who've been able to create this roadmap of navigating a whole range of issues. How do you be number one, how do you become your authentic self without inverted commas selling out? I mean, and we can debate what selling out means. I'm not gonna go there right now, but crazy quantum. What's going on, brother? Anyway, no, seriously, I don't mean. I mean, lots of people. No, lots of. I mean, to be on a serious note, I've never. That was a joke, but I think, you know, people have their own journey, so I'm not going to be the one to say that person solved that. Yeah, because people have got different journeys. You don't know what's going on in their lives, what decisions they make. The only thing you can do is what decisions you can make, and if you're lucky to make the right decisions about the life you want to lead, who you work with, who you support, how you manage the politics. And for many of those, I think I noticed on the chat, quite a few people are working at institutions like at the NHS or the academy and other places, where you're told, of course we want you to be your authentic self, but deep down I don't want you to be your authentic self. And it's a hard one. How do you become your authentic self when you see an glaring injustice in the workplace, or a service that you're delivering and you see glaring injustice, but yet your organization doesn't have the inclination, energy, or foresight to say, let's tackle this on, basically. There's been a bit more of that work since Black Lives Matter, but even with that, it's conditional on individuals, it's conditional on circumstances. It's a hard one, to be quite honest, and my advice to everyone, if you're in that tightrope situation, is friends, family networks, and do stuff outside your day job that gives you a sense of meaning and purpose. For some people, it's their faith. For some people, it's doing community work. For me, it was the Black History. I'm not joking, that's what kept me going, doing Black History, developing my websites, Every Generation, doing my 100 Great Black Britains campaign, publishing Robin Walker's book, Women Ruled, making short films, doing a whole range of stuff, campaign for the idea of a Women's Day, all these things, doing family genealogy, all these things have kept me going, and also doing a bit of DJ work. Music's so important, goes back to the Bob Marley thing, yeah. But all this stuff's kept me going. I mean, that's not to say I've had crises, but all this stuff has kept my resilience going, and learning about our history is really important, because when you're in those situations, which you will face, when people are challenging, why are you proposing this change in this policy or this change in this service? Why do you want to have this consideration? And if you've got all the facts and information about our history and heritage, where we're coming from, you know, you can defend it. You can make a good case. You can defend that. It's only when you don't have that information that you can't say anything. You can't challenge, or if you do challenge, you might do it in the wrong way. So that's just, I mean, I'm just a short, I mean, we haven't got time for all this, but that's just a short, so I might have to do a masterclass on how to survive.
Not yet. No, thank you for that. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's a journey for us all. I always reflect that each to their own, you know, we're all different. We all have a different experience, but there's something about the fact that, you know, as a person of color, as a person of African heritage, we have a common experience of one particular thing, and that is, you know, at some point there is a level of oppression either waved at us or around us that you bear witness to, and you can, that's that thing that we connect with, you know. And I think you make such a great point of referring to our authentic self and nurturing that, because denying being yourself, you know, that's the challenge. And how you can keep a right balance of doing what's right, but doing what you need to do, basically, which is keep a roof over your head. Thank you so much, Brother Patrick, for answering that. And you're right, we could do a whole, I think in every particular question or subject that we raise, we could probably do a whole episode on it. And I'm sure we've got some, I know we've got some amazing talent right here that would be able to have the expertise in those particular fields. So moving on though, and these are very broad questions, but I know you can pinpoint into the crucial and key points. So next one is, what are, we've covered it a bit, what are the key issues of Black men's mental health particularly?
Yeah.
What are the key issues? And if we think maybe pre-COVID, George Floyd and the unfortunate passings of, you know, African heritage people across the globe,
Yeah.
and post-COVID, post-pandemic, post George Floyd, what would you say the key issues are pre and post?
Pre and post, to be quite honest, there's nothing pre and post. It's still the same issue. We're just given a different historical context and lens. I suppose the only factor post COVID is that more people in Britain have had some degree of social isolation, depression, anxiety because of COVID, and maybe that might give people greater enlightenment around the conversation around mental health well-being. That's the only thing I can see, and as well as obviously bereavement, because there've been so many of us in the community that have died during this time period as well. So the whole loss and grief angle and the social isolation angle has meant, as a society, we are more empathetic, I think, to people's mental distress, and also the experiences of social isolation, and it does have a disproportionate impact on Black people because of our economic health status, issues around poverty and where we live, has further exacerbated that. I think what's going to happen, I don't want to be a naysayer, but I can see I sit on the board of a mental health trust, and we get reports about how many people have been sectioned, how many, stuff like that, and just that small snapshot. I believe in the next, if we don't put in the right necessary resources around supporting people in their mental distress, I think more of us will get caught up in the psychiatric system, basically. So it goes back to the heart of your question, is for Black men has always been seen as a problem for society. It's not about mental health, it's about society. Miniature society, that classic music and film back in the 90s, we are still seen as a mental society as it was during the period of enslavement. The difference then, we were a commodity and a property, and we were used and abused by plantation owners, not just for working the plantations and the fields, but created to be studs. So to keep the gene pool going in terms of more Black labour for profit. And a lot of research has been done on this. Naim Akbar, respected African-American professor and academic, Dr. Joy Leary, many others have written the whole stuff around post-traumatic stress syndrome or post-slavery syndrome, or the impact of enslavement on our mentality and as our health, and the whole stuff around weathering, because slavery and enslavement is part of that epigenetic process that we changed. So when we were caught and taken across that horrid Middle Passage where millions perished, that changed the genetics of Black people in the West, whether we're in Britain, in America, Brazil. Our genetics changed because of that condition. It's called, the concept's called weathering. It's used quite, there's a concept called weathering, which is describing that our, the weather changes, like if water goes on a stone, it changes. So our DNA changed. And on top of that, our mental health state changed in terms of how we saw ourselves. Hence the concept of social death. That, like the classic example is not on a plantation. You could not show love and affection to your children, to your partner. If you did, then that would have a major impact on your mental well-being, because any one time you could be sold, they could be sold. So you couldn't show that attachment to loved ones. We were designed not to show feelings and affection. It's only after emancipation. I mean, that we have the rise of the black family. Then we came black family units after emancipation. I've traced my family history in Jamaica, and I found out the detailed plantation where my parents, mother's side of the family, where they came from. And after emancipation, they all left that plantation, bought their own land, and we call it the family land, which everyone has family land, don't they? And that's when they started as a proper family unit. But you're only talking about 1838. It's not that long. We're talking about 140, 50 years for us to create our own agency. So when people say, and when sociologists then describe us in Britain, oh, these black families are dysfunctional. No, we are functional families, but we're in a dysfunctional society. That's a problem. And we need to flip it round, basically, around that. So black men in that context, were breeding, had a clear function. And unfortunately, we've adapted these behaviours sometimes in a positive way, and let's face it, sometimes in a very negative way. You know, and then how you negotiate that. And then we were seen as men's society, and we are still seen a big black and dangerous. That was a report that was done back in 1990 to describe how mental health services saw black people. The report done called Breaking Circles of Fear, that was done by the Central Centre about 20 years ago. That report was done. The report, you could just change the date, and that date will still be the same. In that report, it described the circles of fear. Black people were fearful of mental health services because, you know, once you get in there, you might lose your mind, you might lose everything. And mental health services are fearful of black people. That fear factor is still there, and black men are seen as fearful even today. I mean, you know, like classic example. You know, you go on the tube or the bus, and you could be the only black. There could be empty seats all the way around you, and someone of a different ethnic background will literally go the other direction, just in case you think that you might get mugged or raped or God knows what. It's that perception that we need to tackle, and until we tackle that perception, black men will always be seen as a threat. But we've reinforced some of that. You know, that concept of black don't crack. So black men. You know, the classic reggae tune, Men Cry Too, and we should play that actually later, Nate.
Yeah,
but,
we should.
You know, but men, you know, we're meant to design that men don't cry, men don't have feelings, or, you know, we want to reinforce these stereotypes, don't we? Well, you know, the Tupac stereotype, the Biggie stereotype, you know, all the stereotypes you can think of the invincible, virile black male, and sometimes we play into that, don't, you know, and that's the issue in itself, basically.
I just seen in the chat, we had Amina Barber say the bus example is universal for people of color, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it is very true. I mean, I will share working. I mean, you get it whether you're, you know, we spoke earlier about managing that corporate or your working life and your personal life and, you know, your family life, your society life, your community life. And in whatever walk of life, you know, it can be difficult at times. I remember working when I was working full-time in the NHS as a community mental health recovery support worker, one in which that was helping people to achieve their goals. And I was working in the borough of Richmond upon Thames. Okay. So for those that are familiar, that's near Kingston upon Thames, not the one in Jamaica, obviously, but over here in the UK, where think of Wimbledon tennis and around those areas. And the wave of emotions, and then there's a question that I wanted to ask you, just I guess to briefly conclude on the key issues, is the wave of emotions, how I'm feeling and thinking really burnt a lot of energy. Brother Patrick, working in Richmond, I would be frequently posed in a position where I would be going to, you know, someone's home, affluent, you know, area, normally with people of European background, English background, and just the way that you know, already you're being perceived, the way that the interaction takes place. You know, sometimes nothing can be said. It's just a matter of looks like you're saying, on the bus, and it can be difficult, but you have to try and find a way of balancing that. And so my outlook was, you know, you mentioned of African history and similar to that, but my main was always football, and it was a way to kind of put myself in a space of escapism, but you have to come back into it. And that's what I see as the difficult. So, you know, just to conclude on this part, what are kind of the thoughts and feelings that have gone over you, and generally, you know, because you've supported and have been a servant to many young Black men. What do you think are the key feelings that go over us, and you know, how detrimental is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big topic, and I'd love to hear from other people in the chat. I mean, I can give only my perspective. I mean, I'm not so young now. I mean, I'm classed as elder now, so I suppose it's...
That don't crack, Brother Patrick.
Yeah,
what are you talking about?
I know. But I think, you know, I think it's a mixed emotions, isn't it? I mean, you know, we want to aspire in our careers, in our lives, to have nice things, to be respected. But if you're disrespected every single day and you internalize that disrespect, you know, I think in the 80s, there was lots of anger. We were regularly stopped and searched by the police. It hasn't changed that much because young people there have been stopped and searched by the police. And there's different methodologies they use now to keep an eye on us. But it was very blatant back in the day. It was, so you knew the enemy, you could deal with that in a funny way. You knew that sense of rejection. It was in black and white, you know, and not, you know, and it's more sophisticated. And I remember I've been doing regular talks of Black History Month now for 20 odd years, maybe longer. And the last few years, I've been, well, apart from, I've done quite a few talks. I mean, prior to the pandemic, I remember going to quite a few universities during Black History Month, meeting students, and you know, they were talking about their experiences of racism in the academy and not being supported. I was reflecting myself, what was it like when I was at the university back at that time? You couldn't even talk about racism, you just had to get on with it. There was no luxury, no student counsellors, we didn't have all that infrastructure that is, which is quite rightly that we have today. But as I was listening to some of these young students telling me about their experiences of, you know, discrimination, how they've been treated, how they're feeling, and some of them were challenging the evidence base of academics. To say, hold, you know, I remember I was at SOAS, and there was about 300 students there, and some of them were saying, "No, we know more than these academics at SOAS because my parents taught me this. I've been on African history programs. I went to SOAS. I can learn even more." And actually, it was the complete opposite. I've been disempowered because I've been told, actually, you need to learn this European perspective on African history. Forget anything else. And they felt even more angry and felt, you know. So it's interesting. It's a different type of dynamic that we're going through. It really is.
It's mixed emotions. I think, as you quite rightly said, there's wants of how we want to be, but then we're faced with some of those barriers to let us feel how we want to feel, and anger. I mean, I can say, you know, the optimism, because as we said, you don't want to make it too dark and dreary, although that's the real. I'm sure the family here that are in attendance know we're dealing with the real issues, which unfortunately and sadly are negative. But one of the positive is the progression, is the kind of milestones that can be picked up. So I think back to when I was in primary school, right? And I'm sure you, as my bigger brother, you know, it was a bit different. But what I remember experiencing was not putting my hand, this is how you can indicate from a young age, putting my hand up and never being given the permission to speak. And it'd always be my white counterpart. They would get the answer right, they would get the praise. And anger started to build up inside, not knowing then at the age of what, 6, 7 years old, how to channel that anger. I would constantly call out blatantly to the teacher, "You're racist," because it was a word then. And I was allowed to say it in school, but I did get disciplined. I remember going to a parents' evening and my mum saying, "What's all this?" Because the teacher came crying. She actually brought her African heritage partner in, which, you know, it is what it is, but to make it clear that she is not racist, etc. But there was something in that. But it's just a progression of, you know, we're starting to, or I don't like saying starting, we have been on a continuum of opening up, being honest, having that honest conversation, as we're doing now, to the point where it's starting to make this conversation, you know, due to repetition, sadly, but more of the norm, isn't it? More something that we can discuss. And so with that said, because I know we're running on trying to run on a strict time, although we can go on forever, is I'll try and combine the two last questions. So one being, what are the key indicators of Black men's mental health, I guess, deteriorating or improving? But also, what is the current state from your observations, from your knowledge base? What is the current state of Black men's mental health today?
Okay.
You know, considering the pandemic. So we spoke about the issues, we spoke about the history. What are the indicators? What are the current states of affairs when it comes to Black men's mental health?
Okay, so if you look at Black men who have been in and out of the psychiatric system for the last 15, 20 plus years. So I facilitated the group about 18 months, just before the pandemic. I was facilitating the Black men's group in Hackney at Core Arts, which is a charity that does arts and wellbeing for going for about 25 years. And in this group, there were a mixture of straight Black men, trans, and gay men. And eventually, we had separate workshops on particular issues for the gay and trans men. But I facilitated the workshop with all of them together for I did about 3 sessions. And so I asked them questions. What's improved for you? You've been in that system. Some people have been in that system for 20 years. Some people, younger people, about 3-4 years. All of them were saying, I want to go off medication. I want to go off medication because the medication is affecting a whole range of things, from how to engage with women in terms of partners, how to just function, because I'm the side effects of medication. And you have to remember, back in the 80s and 90s, we were over-medicated. We're not so much over-medicated now, because the science of pharmacology is a bit more sophisticated, and there've been lots of campaigns over the years around Black people being over-medicated. But if you've been over-medicated consistently for a long time, and it's in your body, it's hard work to detoxify those medications and to try and wean yourself off those medications. But speaking to some of the guys, that was their goal. If I get off these medications, I could be me again. And that's not to say that we don't need medication, but the evidence base is these medications do not improve people's recovery at all. There's no evidence that proves people's recovery, along with evidence around IAPS. It does not improve people's recovery. It's just a model that's there to keep people in a status. If you look at the recovery rates for Black men in any mental health trust, and I want to be challenged by this, the recovery rates are less than white people, other people. We are spending millions and billions on mental health services, and we're not even getting better. We're actually getting worse. So it raises a fundamental question about the way that we design, commission mental health care policy, the way that we develop policy around mental health, the way that the Mental Health Act has been designed as well. So that's the first thing. The second thing is around the general aspect of our own well-being. We're still not going to see primary care, in terms of seeing doctors and whole practice nurses for a whole range of health conditions, because again, that trust with NHS is wanting. That is why, if you look at what the impact of the pandemic, there are a lot of people in the community who have not taken any vaccine at all, and for a whole variety of reasons, and And one of the reasons why people don't trust the vaccine, not taking the vaccine, some people don't take it because of their own particular health conditions or conspiratorial, they might think something's going to happen to them. But actually, the main reason, I think, is that trust. The service, we're all proud of the NHS. I've worked at the NHS. I'm very proud to be part of the NHS. But at the same time, the NHS has let us down. So the trust stuff is a big issue. And when it comes to black men, it's even more so, to be quite honest. Again, we need to tackle these stereotypes within ourselves that black don't crack, that we're invincible. We're not invincible. We have to be more open about our feelings. We need to create more safe spaces for black men to talk and to share their experiences. We need a lot more resources. I'm thinking about it. The safe space that used to exist don't exist anymore.
Indeed.
Where people go, the safe space where people go now is a betting shop. You go to the bet, you can spend a whole day. I've seen the guys. You could spend £1, have a tea and coffee, see your mates. You might put a bet on, but that's a new day centre.
Yeah,
that's where people go.
The scarcity of we commonly say the scarcity of resources or access to these resources or the trust of these resources are those common issues that we face. And just thank you, Brother Patrick, because it was a great oversight in dealing with those questions. And I know we're getting some really good questions coming in. Mindful of the time, it's 2:03. I'd say we'll have a 5-minute break. Shall we say they're coming back at I really want to give people the chance to speak, but I really want to give people a break. 10 past. Let's say 10 past. So give people 7 minutes. In the meantime, what we'd like you to do is just really reflect on discussions that have been had. And like I've seen a few people, and apologies, I've seen Justine and Rich, unfortunately you've got to go, but thank you for attending and giving your feedback. And Glenda further has already started with the question, so that's amazing. So everyone following Glenda's lead in thinking about your questions and either popping them in the chat. When we come back at 10 past, 6 minutes now, we'll be going into conversations, and that'll be sharing with yourselves, any questions you wanted answered or comments you want to raise, or sharing of experiences is more than welcome. So we'll be back at 10 past, if that's okay. We'll see you then. All right. Patrick?
This meeting is being recorded.
Excellent. All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. Hope you've been able to grab, minutes just go fast. So I hope you've been able to grab either something to snack on or to drink as well, and reflect on, the discussion we've had so far. We've gone over a quiz that, gives the ever prominent statistics, and we discussed on the historical journeys of Black men's mental health, the political aspects of it, the key issues, the indicators, the state of Black men's mental health, all of these subjects that, we could have separate conversations about, but interested to know from the chat. So I don't know, Sister Mia, did you want to read them out, or I'm happy to do?
As they come through. Someone's got, why do you think recovery is less? Do you think identity and knowing who they are from you to old, from young to old? So why is recovery less? Do you think identity and knowing who you are from young to old?
Again, another opening up a Pandora's box. Excellent question, though. Excellent question.
And then there's another one here. There's a distrust with medication and the vaccination due to the history of Europeans using the Black community as guinea pigs for medical trials. I think even within the female Black community, regarding misinformation regarding contraception as forms of sterilizers cause major distrust. So that's from Maria.
Maria, yeah, and then earlier we had Cheryl, wasn't it? That said
Cheryl
part of the
Taylor.
problem.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, earlier was part of the problem is that we are
And
more
then there's
likely.
someone called Richard who says, can you speak some more about weathering and where more information could be found? Now, I've not heard this term before, so perhaps enlighten us.
Yeah, with
Maybe
weathering,
that's the good.
David Williams is academic at Harvard University. Just do a Google search. He's written books on the whole. I mean, there've been lots of people write about the whole concept of weathering, but in the context of racism weathering, David Williams, he's done a lot of research work on this, and he's also on the board of the Race and Health Observatory. So the Race and Health Observatory are organising a conference, I think, this summer on the latest research work on health inequalities and race. So I recommend you to register for that conference. I think it's over 2 days. I think it's online. And you're going to hear experts from around the world giving issues around racism and the impact on our physical health and mental health as well. So I'd recommend that.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you for that, Brother Patrick. And I just want to take it back to Glenda's question. Why do you think the recovery is less? Do you think identity and knowing who they are from young to old, I guess, plays a part? And I think you answer that in the second question, Glenda. You know, why is recovery less? I think this segues into Brother Patrick, if you want to speak about weathering. I think that has a big impact on the low recovery rates. And I just add, and coming back into society, because part of my role when working in the NHS was helping people who may have come off a psychiatric ward, who may have had a really distressful time of potentially of being sectioned, having a mental breakdown, and coming back into society, the managing of medication, the coming back into the norms of society. I saw it every day of how much it's a challenge, and the structures and the systems in place. We always say they could be better, but sometimes it seems it can be quite detrimental in the fact that, you know, everybody's different. Everybody has a unique way of having that mental breakdown and recovering, you know. So I think it very much is about the identity. It very much is about the you know, knowing your journey from young to old, and knowing before that, you know, we say in a lot of Pan-African texts, Sankofa, which is to go back and fetch, to learn. And I'm joined again by my esteemed compatriot in the movement and big brother in Patrick, who can talk to that, I'm sure. Weathering, Brother Patrick, and, you know, identity. What could you say on that?
Well, I've talked a bit about weathering. In terms of, hi Glenda, regarding your question, you're doing great work in Preston, supporting the women's generation through advice and food, which is very important. I mean, when I talk about the recovery rates, these are when people are on either in wards, or they're in the community on the community treatment orders, and it seems to be less. I think, you know, I think Nate, you touched on some of the issues when people are trying to get back into society. If you haven't got those networks, those support networks, or you've had difficult relationships with family members, it's very difficult. How do you kind of create the networks that you need to do the things that we take for granted that we do? As you know, what I mean, that's one thing. But also, I think the impact of medication, lack of talking therapies, and the talking therapies which are available are very narrow, CBT and IOUT. That's it. It's a very kind of fixed, narrow perspective on psychological interventions, and so therefore these don't help. But also, when you have a crisis and you're getting back into society, if you're still living in crap accommodation, or you're not getting work, or you're not in a loving relationship, then all these factors, I mean, all the research that's been done through the whole pandemic, how people have survived the pandemic, unless you've got a big second home in the countryside, and then you're right, aren't you? You can just, you know, swan off. But for most of us, it's having those connections that helps us, or doing something in the community that helps us. And if you've been marginalised or stigmatised, and the system, and you're living on and you have medication, and you're not quite sure what you're doing. It's very difficult. And you know, I lost a good friend of mine. She died a few days ago. She's been in and out of the psychiatric system for about 25 years, and she tried her best. She tried the best that she could do, but sometimes during that crisis mode, you have to go back into be sectioned again because you're not getting the right support networks out there. It's really difficult, really is. So that's why I think our recovery rates are lower. I mean, if you compare that with people, when I worked at Mind, we did an inquiry, and this is about going some years ago now. We did a Mind inquiry, which I led for the organisation. We got evidence from corporate senior directors who had a mental health crisis, but they were given the right conditions, private mental health care, supportive employers, and also they're on good income, so they can deal with recovery. If you've got no money, no home, or very little resources, the recovery is difficult. That's not to say that people don't recover, because people do recover, but it's much harder. You have to really, you know, look at a whole range of ways of that recovery.
We often say, because I've had my time of working with the Recovery College of the South West London and St George's Mental Health Trust, many people know it as Springfield Hospital in Tooting. And one of the key things that they always emphasize is that obviously recovery is unique, but giving people the sense of hope, control, and options is, you think they're very simple, but what we call the psychosocial factors, that which is the society's factors, and I think Sanchia highlights it here, you know, your environment, your housing, your family, your economics, just as you've been touching on, Patrick, plays such a big impact. And when we fall in the Black and minority ethnic grouping, I guess, in predominantly the lower levels of socio and economic hierarchy, if you'd want to say, it proves difficult, doesn't it? I want to make sure we don't lose any of the questions.
There's a question here regarding UK Black experience in mental health from a psychological perspective. Where do you believe research would be best directed? Keen to explore this from a qualitative study.
A qualitative study. I think that, give thanks for that, Ryan, because you're leading on to what I wanted our next kind of part of this, our final part of this conversation, which is the solutions, the next steps. You know, where do we go from here? And thank you as well to who is it, Cheryl, for putting in the hyperlinks of some of those books mentioned. But yes, regards to the UK Black experience and mental health from a psychological perspective, where do you believe research would be best directed? There comes a solution-based question. To yourself, Robert Patrick, where do you believe?
I mean, the good thing is there are more and more Black people doing research work at PhD level, master's level. There's more compared to, say, 20 years ago. So, which means, you know, so each time I'm always contacted by someone saying, I'm doing this research project, can you either give me advice or some pointers or whatever. So it's really positive that there's more of us doing that. So this is the difference between us and America. So when I talked about Dr. Williams, Professor Williams at Harvard University, they're doing a lot of research work on the impact of racism on the Black body. We don't do this kind of research work in the UK. We look at inequalities in the context, and we will bring in race as a factor, but we're not looking at the impact of structural racism and the legacy of enslavement as a key examining question in the research project. We're not doing that kind of research work at all, and we need to do that kind of research work because I think we could get even more answers and more solutions around, number one, about how we commission mental health services. Number two, the policy context of mental health services. Number three, about the types of therapy interventions that's required. Number four, the types of services in the community Number 5, you have a model of co-production working with the community and with the NHS. I think if we did this kind of research work, then commissioners would have no choice not to avoid it. Currently, commissioners rely on the same old regurgitated research work that black people are mad and dangerous. We must make sure that we have necessary support projects that support that we need to change the mindset. That's what we need to do. And also we need to have more, but I sit on boards, we need to have more black people influencing the mainstream of how services are, whilst at the same time having more community projects. What I've seen interestingly over the last few years is there's been a massive explosion of black people taking things in their own control, creating podcasts, conversations, their own therapeutic interventions. So they're not gone down the traditional charity route, i.e. let's get building, let's do a charity. They're actually doing stuff, people doing stuff either online or in different ways, creatively to engage. And I think that's a positive thing. So we need to have new models of service delivery, but we still need to have services. It'd be fantastic to have more black-led services where we manage beds in the community or crisis houses. We need more crisis houses. When people are in that crisis situation, why should they be sectioned on the 136 and go to a police station, or which is meant to be a place safety, even though it's still a police station, still use a place safety, to be quite honest. Why couldn't they go into a therapeutic environment where people give them that support, basically? So we need more investment. There's a report that was launched last week called 10 more years, by the organisation 10 more years, and they're challenging funders and philanthropists to give the money and resources back to the black community so we can co-produce what works for us.
Absolutely. We've spoken in the past, Brother Patrick, my stance. I lean more on the side of nation building, on having that self-determination, self-sufficiency, self-actualization, self-reliance. I'm very keen on that personally, but I'm aware that, we pay our taxes, we pay our national insurance, we are in the industries and the department.
I don't know what happened there.
He's frozen.
I wasn't quite sure it's me. Any more questions before Nate joins us?
Yeah, there was a question to do with people's experiences of accessing therapies.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big issue. I know more black therapists in private practice than working for the NHS. What's going on there, everyone? Crazy. Doesn't make sense at all. Which means that people have to pay for their therapy. We're paying our taxes on our national insurance contributions, and yet you're only offered CBT and IOT. I'm sorry, I don't know if there's any practitioners doing CBT. I'm not dissing you personally because I know you're therapists in your own training, but the model that has been imposed for the last 15 years does not work for black people and people of colour. It does not work.
So do you think therapies become very less common for women? However, it's even less and not spoken of or encouraged for black men?
I think women are more likely to generally are more conscious about their mind and body than men. Men are living on a certain pretext that we're invincible or in denial. So women are more likely to seek help around talking therapies than men, to be quite honest. But so we need to think of ways of breaking that cycle down. So men can cry. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be yourself. It's not going to take away your masculinity. Actually, it might redefine your masculinity in many ways. Okay.
Well, we're now at almost 2:30. So I want to take the opportunity to thank both Professor Patrick Vernon and Nathaniel Pamah for this talk organised by London South Bank Union, Chloe, Sanchia and Neil. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for being online, and just I know that everyone's busy networking and sharing stuff. I'm actually working on the books. Some of the things I've been talking about is going to be in the book. Still working on it. I'm really behind schedule. My publishers are harassing me as we speak right now. So hopefully when it's out, you can hopefully you'll be there to find more, some of the things I've explored, which I'm going a bit more detail.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Sanchia, do you have a few closing words? And then we've got a video to play us out. That's fine. I will play this video and this will play us out. So on behalf of everyone from LSBU, thank you so much. We will be sharing the recording with everyone post-event, so those that missed it can check in with it. And if you just thought it was so good that you'd like to dip in again, that'll be added to our YouTube channel. So I'm just going to play this video now.
We all have mental health. If we all have it, we can all look after it. So where to begin? Point to your nose. Point to your eyes. Point to your prefrontal cortex. Say what? If we want to know how to take care of our mental health, we need to know about our brain. So let me tell you a story about the animals that represent key parts of your mind. Meet the wise owl, the prefrontal cortex. It helps you make good decisions and problem solve. Next up is the guard dog, the amygdala, which if it senses danger, helps you fight, freeze or flee. This next character is the sifting sooty, the raz. Have you ever been told to focus? The sifting sooty does just this. It can block out loads of distractions so you can concentrate on what's important. Finally, meet the elephant who tries to remember, the hippocampus. It helps you lock in information and store memories. Everything is going smoothly when the animals are talking to each other. You can focus, make wise decisions, remember things, and feel safe. But sometimes your guard dog treats everyday stresses and setbacks, such as making a mistake or an argument with a friend, as a serious threat. That sweet little dog can get very big and bossy, and this can make it super hard for the other animals to do their jobs. Here's the thing. We can learn to recognize when our guard dog is getting big and be taught ways to shrink it. We can also learn daily practices that support our other animals, boost our mental well-being, and, with any luck, enable us to flourish. Grow Your Mind has developed resources for schools and homes that encourage an holistic and consistent language of what it means to feel mentally healthy. Are you a school already using a wellbeing program? Excellent. You're not alone. Our resources will give wings to what you're doing. Our imagery, stories, and learning activities will add greater meaning to familiar wellbeing topics. Use them for as little as 1 minute a day, or run whole units of work that link directly to the curriculum for preschoolers through to Year 6. Choose your own flourishing adventure by following the links on our website.
Nathaniel, you're back.
I am. So I do. Sorry about that. Yeah, apologies to all, whoever's still with us. It's like that dog ate my homework excuse. My battery died. And just getting into a juicy part. I do apologize. I see that we've just wrapped up, have we?
Yes, we have. Yeah.
Yeah, we're finished.
All right. There's always never enough time. I'm sorry about that. I hope we got a lot out of that. But
Well, you all must be exhausted. So well done. It was a marathon event.
Yes,
Patrick, well done for keeping up with it all, because there were
we went through a lot, didn't we? Yes.
Yeah, you could almost do a seminar on weathering, couldn't you?
Well, yes, I suppose so.
All the solutions.
Cramming insights into mental health, let alone Black mental health, is not something you can cover in all bases in an hour and 90 minutes, is it? But yeah, I see Chloe there. Apologies, Chloe. My battery just died, and I saw that it was low a bit earlier and thought, oh no.
Oh no, that's fine. I just wanted to say thank you so much. That went really well. So thank you. Sorry, I've just been muting myself because my son's at home sick and he's got the television on, so
Oh.
I've got to keep. But thank you so much. I really appreciated that, guys. I really did.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
How do you feel that it went?
I think we've still got Glenda with us. How's your,